Beverly Hills, a closed garage, a beautiful woman found dead in her Mercedes. At first, it looked like a tragic accident, but the truth? Far more sinister. A stolen ring, two sisters, and a jealousy that burned for decades. Someone planned the perfect murder, but there's no such thing, because science doesn't lie. I'm Detective Chief Robert Morgan, and these are the Detective's True Crime Files. In one of Beverly Hills' most exclusive gated communities, a young and beautiful woman was found dead inside the closed garage of a luxury estate. Michelle Lawson, 33 years old, a former fashion model and now the wife of one of California's wealthiest real estate developers, lay motionless in her Mercedes that morning. Her glamorous life had come to a tragic end. The person who discovered her body was Brandon Nash, another former model turned event planner. The 40-year-old Brandon had come to meet Michelle that morning at their usual spot. The garage door was closed, the air thick with exhaust fumes. Brandon immediately called 911. When Detective Chief Robert Morgan arrived at the scene, he quickly assessed the situation. A dead woman in a car, a single shoe on the ground, the garage sealed shut. At first glance, it looked like a simple tragic accident. A diabetic woman had passed out and died from carbon monoxide poisoning. But Detective Morgan didn't believe in simple answers. "You see that shoe," he said to his team, "and those drag marks on the floor. This woman was dragged to the car." When the autopsy results came in, his suspicions were confirmed. Michelle had strangulation marks on her neck and bruising on her face. Someone had attacked her, knocked her unconscious, dragged her to the car, and left her to die from the exhaust fumes. And the most striking finding? The wound on her face matched the pattern of a ring with a distinctive engraved design. When Brandon Nash was brought in for questioning, he tried to hide the truth, but eventually had to confess. He and Michelle had been having a secret affair for 7 months. Both married, they had met through mutual friends and fallen into a passionate relationship. Her husband David knew nothing about it, or so they thought. "We only communicated through email for our meetings," Brandon explained. "We never talked on the phone, so no one would find out. That day I got an email to meet at 8:30 p.m. But when I arrived, Brandon's story seemed consistent, but something was missing. Detective Morgan noticed a crucial detail. Michelle had been sent an email to meet at 6:30 p.m., while Brandon said 8:30 p.m., a 2-hour difference. Why? During a search of his home, investigators discovered that Brandon had lost a valuable ring, an heirloom from his mother, featuring a distinctive engraved pattern. Michelle had loved that ring and sometimes borrowed it. "It's been missing for a few days," Brandon said. "I don't know where I put it." But according to the forensic report, the wound on Michelle's face matched that exact ring perfectly. Someone had punched Michelle while wearing that ring. As the investigation deepened, a tangled web began to emerge. Michelle's sister Claire, 35 years old, was quiet and mysterious. When Detective Morgan interviewed her, he sensed she was hiding something. "How was your relationship with your sister?" he asked. "Good," Claire said, but her eyes told a different story. Like any marriage, Michelle and David had some problems recently. A search of Claire's apartment revealed men's toiletries in the bathroom, a razor, deodorant, and a man's t-shirt in the laundry basket. Claire claimed she lived alone. The crime scene investigation team's findings were shocking. Hair samples found in Brandon's bed belonged to 2 women besides himself. DNA analysis showed these 2 women were related through their mother's side, most likely sisters. "Did you have a relationship with Claire?" Detective Morgan asked. Brandon hung his head. "Yes. Actually, Claire introduced me to Michelle. We were dating at the time. Then, I fell in love with Michelle. Claire never forgave me." The investigation took another turn. A parking lot operator named Kenny Davis had been blackmailing Michelle. Brandon revealed that Kenny had photographed him and Michelle together and demanded money. When Kenny was arrested, he had explosive evidence. Not just photos of Brandon and Michelle, but others too. And he had sold them to David. "David knew his wife was cheating," Kenny said, "and he paid me handsomely. He didn't want this getting out. Would have ruined his reputation." When passport records were checked, the bomb dropped. David had claimed he was overseas on the night of the murder. but records showed he had returned to the United States one day earlier. And when the blood on the razor at Claire's apartment was DNA tested, it matched David's. David and Claire had been together the night of the murder. Detective Morgan put Claire under surveillance. The woman made a secret meeting in a shopping mall parking garage with Kenny's associates. She received an envelope. Inside were photographs. She was caught red-handed. "What are these photos?" Detective Morgan demanded. Claire was desperate. "Kenny's blackmailing me. Photos from my old relationship with Brandon. If David sees these..." But the real bombshell was on Kenny's cell phone. There were other photos there, from the night of the murder. Kenny had to tell everything. "I was there that night," he said. "I'd been to the house before where Michelle and Brandon met. I photographed them, but that night I saw something different." What Kenny described was horrifying. Michelle had arrived early, at 6:30 p.m. She was in her car waiting for Brandon. But before Brandon arrived, someone else came. Claire. The two sisters started arguing. Claire grabbed Michelle by the throat. Michelle, who was diabetic, went into shock and passed out. Kenny had photographed everything through the side window. "What happened next?" Detective Morgan asked. Claire dragged Michelle to the car. She pulled surgical gloves from her purse. She put a ring on her finger, Brandon's ring. Then she started the car. The exhaust began filling the garage. She closed the garage door and walked away. The evidence was overwhelming now. Claire and David were interrogated separately. David broke first. "It was all Claire's plan," he said. "She told me Michelle was cheating on me. She showed me the photos. My career would be destroyed if this got out." Claire said, "There's a solution." And I agreed. According to their plan, David would go overseas, then return secretly without anyone knowing. On the night of the murder, he would be at Claire's apartment. Claire would leave Michelle to die. Brandon would be blamed. The missing ring, the DNA evidence, the secret affair, everything pointed to him. But something went wrong. David couldn't go through with it at the last minute. He called Claire saying, "I can't do it." Claire, furious, said, "I'll handle it," and went alone. Finally, Claire spoke, but there was no remorse in her voice. "I've hated her since the day she was born," Claire said, speaking of Michelle. "I was my parents' first joy, their first love. Michelle stole them from me. She stole everything from me. Her beauty, her success, men. It was an endless race with every breath. That night, I just took revenge for all those years." Claire had started strangling Michelle, but her sister went into diabetic shock and passed out. "I couldn't kill her," Claire said, "but I left her to die. I started the car, closed the door, and left." When David returned home, he said, "I couldn't do it." Claire replied, "I finished it." They were both in shock, but there was no going back now. Detective Morgan's team had built an airtight case. The forensic evidence was damning. The ring. Brandon's missing ring was eventually found in a storm drain near Claire's apartment. It tested positive for Michelle's DNA. The timeline. Computer forensics revealed that both emails to Michelle and Brandon were sent from the same coffee shop in Westwood. Someone with access to both email passwords had sent them. That someone was Claire. Blood dating, advanced forensic techniques determined that the blood on David's razor at Claire's apartment was less than 48 hours old at the time of discovery, proving David had been there despite his claims of being overseas. The garage remote. Only 3 people had remotes to that garage: Michelle, Brandon, and the property owner. But Claire had stolen Michelle's remote weeks earlier. The photographs, Kenny's photos, from murder night showed everything. The argument, the strangulation, Claire dragging her unconscious sister, the surgical gloves, the ring, starting the car. The trial was sensational. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The defense tried to argue that Michelle's diabetic shock was the real cause of death, not the exhaust fumes. But medical experts testified that had Claire called 911 when Michelle collapsed, she would have survived. Claire Lawson was convicted of first-degree murder with special circumstances, premeditation, and lying in wait. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. David Lawson was convicted of conspiracy to commit murder and being an accessory. He received 25 years in prison. Kenny Davis was convicted of blackmail, extortion, and tampering with evidence. He received 25 years. Brandon Nash was cleared of all charges and released. As Detective Morgan closed the case file, he reflected on what he'd learned. This case had everything, he told his partner, Detective Harris. Jealousy, greed, betrayal, family rivalry. But what really solved it was good old-fashioned police work combined with modern forensic science. The case had hinged on several key pieces of evidence. First, the 2-hour gap in the meeting times. Why would someone arrange for Michelle to arrive 2 hours before Brandon? Because they needed time for her to die. Second, the DNA evidence. The hair in Brandon's bed initially made him look guilty, but it actually proved both sisters had been there, exposing the affair, but also Claire's connection. Third, the ring. Claire had stolen it from Brandon's apartment during one of her visits. She wore it when she punched Michelle, deliberately leaving that distinctive mark to frame Brandon. Fourth, Kenny's photos. His greed for one more big score had inadvertently documented the entire murder. "You know what's tragic?" Detective Morgan said. "Claire spent her whole life competing with her sister. She could never accept that people love both of them in different ways. That jealousy ate at her until it consumed everything." During the trial, a psychologist testified about sibling rivalry. Claire was the firstborn, the expert explained. For 3 years, she was the center of her parents' world. Then Michelle was born, and Michelle was exceptionally beautiful, even as a baby. Claire never recovered from feeling displaced. The rivalry had continued through childhood. Michelle was prettier, more popular, more successful. She became a top fashion model. Claire worked in medical billing. Michelle married a wealthy developer. Claire remained single for years. When Claire finally started dating Brandon, a successful event planner, she thought she'd found happiness. Then she introduced him to her family at a wedding. Brandon met Michelle. Within months, Brandon had left Claire for Michelle. That was the final betrayal, the prosecutor argued. Claire had already lost her parents' attention, lost out on beauty, lost out on career success. Now she'd lost her boyfriend to her sister. She snapped. David Lawson's testimony was particularly pathetic. "I loved Michelle," he sobbed on the stand, "but I was humiliated. Everyone in our social circle knew she was cheating." Kenny made sure of that with his photos. "My business partners were whispering. I was becoming a joke." "So you decided to kill your wife?" the prosecutor asked. "No, I never wanted her dead. Claire convinced me we could just scare her, make her stop the affair. But then Claire said we should go further. She said Michelle would never change, would always humiliate me. And I was weak. I went along with it. But when the time came, I couldn't do it." "But you didn't stop Claire either, did you?" David had no answer. Michelle Lawson's death sent shockwaves through Beverly Hills society. Her funeral was attended by hundreds, fellow models, business associates, friends. Her husband and sister were noticeably absent, already in jail. Brandon Nash spoke at the service. "Michelle was vibrant, full of life, full of love. She made mistakes, yes, we both did, but she didn't deserve this. No one deserves to die because someone else's jealousy spiraled out of control." The case became a textbook example in forensic science courses, how multiple types of evidence, from DNA to digital forensics to witness testimony, combined to solve a complex murder. As Detective Morgan always said, there's no such thing as a perfect murder, because people aren't perfect, and science doesn't lie. Jealousy, betrayal, revenge, they always leave a trace. Evidence doesn't lie. Science reveals the truth, and justice will be served. Remember, folks, there is no perfect crime. Until the next case, I'm Detective Morgan. Stay safe out there.